Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The white media is constantly trying to find ways to slip things by us, and if we're not careful, we'll let them. And sure, while the outlets that they use are definitely the big red flags that we should be on the alert for, they basically advertise against themselves. The truth of the matter is, if you look at some of the more overt kinds of propaganda that they put out there, it's also helpful to enable you to recognize when the more subtle forms of similar propaganda are being pushed at you. Just take this article that came out of the Huffington Post. Here you have a black woman who says what on the surface at first blush may seem good. She points out that she gossiped and groused with the other white mothers at her child's basketball team practice, but they also confided in each other about their love lives. That seems to be something of a recurring pattern throughout her writing. Now, this black author says that one of her white friends had missed a couple of the kids' practice games at school, and that she, talking about the black author, became panicked. That's her word, not mine. So in a panic, she called up her white friend, and as it turned out, this white friend and her husband had been attending a funeral. Now, this black author said that in the background, she could hear a Montel Jordan song playing. When her white friend finally came back to town, she told the author about this wedding that she had attended, and the author got a little bit hot under the collar because her white friend said that she had been at a black wedding, and that she and her white husband were the only white people there. Now, this black author said that her white friend also told her that the wedding was crazy but beautiful. And the author took umbrage to that, the inference being that the white woman shouldn't have been surprised that the wedding was beautiful simply because the bride and groom were black. There was also some references to jumping over a broom, fried catfish, and soul food. Now, this is a very light-skinned black woman who's writing all this, and she says that she's not biracial, but that her parents are also very light-skinned also. Didn't speak about their parentage, though. Sounds like her folks are into that paper bag test thing then, but I don't want to be judgmental. Anyway, she spends the rest of this piece talking about a study that showed 75% of white people have no friends of color, and that as a black woman, she's expected to be totally at ease in white spaces, whether she truly is at ease or not, and that she didn't do the kind of commentary about these experiences that her white friend had. Now, while this author had her antenna up because of certain things that her friend had said, my own antenna were up about this writer, and my suspicions were confirmed when she went on to complain that when she meets up with her white friends, the conversations are at white restaurants and they talk about white TV shows or go to the white book events on the white side of town. And that's when she said they, talking about her white friends, rarely choose films like Ava DuVernay's whatever. So she goes and name drops Agent DuVernay. That's 3 red flags right there. And if you don't know what's wrong with Agent DuVernay, then you're either very new to this channel or new to planet Earth. But this is the Huffington Post giving this woman a platform, so can we really be surprised? Of course not. Basically, you had what amounted to a tragic mulatto, very light-skinned black woman, complaining about feeling that she doesn't fit in, or that her white friends simply don't take an interest in what she considers to be black culture or black spaces, etc. I was reading this and I was already thinking, she's really taking it personally that she can't get her white female friends to take an interest in her definition of blackness. As much as she talks about being in white spaces, white restaurants, and all the rest of it, and yet she's constantly complaining because apparently her white friends are not accepting of black culture, I'll bet anything she's got a white boyfriend, and sure enough, she does. She says she met her boyfriend 16 years ago. But she doesn't say that they've been boyfriend and girlfriend for 16 years. I find that interesting. This woman is middle-aged, by the way. And I found her wording to be more than a little interesting. We'll talk about that later. But then her story gets even worse when she talks about bringing her white blonde boyfriend around her black family members. According to her, the family does a weekly get-together, about 10 or 15 of them at a time. She says her family gets together and they're loud and raucous. That's how she describes her own family. Her white boyfriend, on the other hand, she describes as coming from a quiet 3-person home. So she basically uses her loud, raucous family as an avatar for black families in general. And she also tries to use what she likes as an avatar for black culture. Agent DuVernay is to black culture what Applebee's is to soul food. If you've never had soul food and you go to Applebee's, you still haven't had it. Black families, like black individuals, are not monolithic. Black families are not loud and raucous just because this black writer's family is. Mine certainly isn't. Uneducated people or people who suffer from poor impulse control or people with mental or emotional issues, they're loud and raucous. People who lack structure are loud and raucous. So she can keep that loud black people trope to herself, but this is how she describes her own family members, and by inference, the black community as a whole. Did I mention this was published by the Huffington Post? And then came the coup de grace. She said that her white blonde boyfriend actually partakes in black movies and theater. I can only assume that she says that because it's black movies and theater that she approves of. In fact, this white boyfriend, who she's known for 16 years, surprised her with tickets to slave play. Yeah, you heard me right. Her white blonde boyfriend, who she lauds as being so interested in black culture and being so understanding, being truly understanding, a white ally, no doubt. He surprised her with tickets to slave play. Gee, why not the color purple while he was at it? So for all her talk about being annoyed at the microaggressions of white moms at her kids' basketball practice, she had no problem with her white boyfriend giving her tickets to slave play. In fact, she lauds him for it, saying, instead of asking me to change who I am by giving up my blackness, he loves me all the more for it. So she considers trash like slave play to be part of her blackness. Now, slave play, for those fortunate enough not to know anything about it, it was written by a black LGBT man, and it's the sexual fantasy of a man who, like a lot of intersectional people, clearly has a fetish for people outside of his own race. Slave play's plot is that some interracial couple's sex life has gotten boring, in part because of race. So the people in these troubled interracial relationships decide to embark on a novel form of couples therapy where they dress up and pretend to be on a slave plantation as a way to fix their relationships. Because hey, there's no better way to bring different races together than to play out the most dehumanizing and blatant example of racial inequality. The white media gobbled it up, of course. They gave all kinds of praise and awards to this tripe, and they all pretended as if this sewage was some sort of important and insightful commentary on race, when it was nothing more than a garden-variety intersectional person's fixation on BDSM. If you like ghetto gaggers, you'll love plantation porn. This is the stuff that this woman lauds as being part of blackness. Now, if you're a black person, and you're in an interracial relationship, and this white significant other decides that their idea of connecting with black culture is to bring you tickets to see a so-called play in which you're supposed to watch black people being forcibly subservient to the sexual demands of white people, and apparently the author is appreciative of this and thankful to the guy who wanted her to watch that because now he's taking a genuine interest in the black experience. If this is the way that you think, get some therapy, and not on a plantation. The atrocities that took place on those plantations wasn't some form of kink, and it wasn't some sort of forbidden love affair either. It was rape, full stop. It was daily violations that took place all the time. Though for a few folks like the bedwenches and bedbugs, it was gutter sex for them, and unfortunately we still see it today. And especially to have a black woman endorsing this kind of thing. Apparently she has not even seen or heard all the instances where you got black women who claim that they got themselves a zaddy and how wonderful everything is and they're divesting and all the rest of it, and then turns around that zaddy shows his true colors, or his family members do while he just sits there and says nothing. How many times have black people in general and black women in specific found themselves in that kind of position? And the consequences oftentimes turn out to be fatal. It's not some victimless crime when you play along with somebody's idea that the degradation, imprisonment, and bondage of black people is actually fodder for their sexual fantasies. Because when these anti-black racists get to play out their little slave owner fantasies, as far as they're concerned, they're trying to tiptoe to the point where they grab the whip and start to put some lacerations on you. That's where they really want to go. It ain't about any sort of sexual kink. It's about being able to get away with unrestrained violence. What it's always been about. Because for these anti-black racists, when they're hurting black people, when they're butchering black people, when they're killing black people, that's what they get off on. I also found it annoying that for a woman who gets triggered by the expectation that she be in alignment with white spaces, she intentionally uses terms like half-seas and besties to describe her white friends. But I decided to see if perhaps this woman has offered her insights before, and sure enough, the Huffington Post has published some of her other brain rot a few years ago. Back in 2021, she wrote another article, which was eerily similar to this latest one, And the title of that earlier article, "A White Woman Told Me She Doesn't Think of Me as Black. Here's How I Reacted." And once again, she's talking about how a white woman at her child's school said something that offended her. It started when the author suggested that more black parents get involved in the school's live auction program, and that was when the white woman allegedly made the remark about she didn't think of her as black, she just thought of her as a parent. And in this case, she gives a brief summary of her life, and that while she acknowledged her social status was higher than most black people, that doesn't make her immune to racism. She also mentioned in this earlier piece that she had been married to a white man 26 years ago. She decided to ward off any accusations of colorism by claiming that she didn't have any choice in who she fell in love with. I find that interesting because she seems to be pretty consistent about who she falls in love with, and it's usually white men. She seems to be all over the place, but is she? She's talking about her feelings about how white people make her feel being in white spaces and being married to a white man 26 years ago and having a white boyfriend for 16 years now, though there's no mention of him actually having married her. There's a war on black relationships and a propaganda offensive to sow the seeds of dysfunction. The people who do it will show up like wolves in sheep's clothing. They make the right sounds about school curriculum and discomfort in white spaces, but then you look just a hair deeper and you see they're actually only talking about themselves. This is the problem with letting Negroes who work for the white media, be they entertainers, writers, or pundits, talk about blackness, because their idea of blackness is specific only to themselves. They're only talking about themselves and what they think. When they try to portray themselves as speaking for the collective, we see them co-signing approved-of Negroes like Agent DuVernay and utter crap like slave play. So we see what kind of interracial relationships they really like, and why the white media has no problem giving them a platform. They'll let you complain about one white person's off-color remarks about a black wedding, so long as you're willing to sign off on another person's endorsement of gutter sex. While it may be obvious what this person was doing, the point of today's briefing is to be on the lookout for the subtler versions of the same kind of talking points. This author chose to immerse herself in white spaces, and she also chose to have people from those spaces as her besties. So is it really a surprise that she ran into these kind of problems? But most disturbingly is the fact that this woman tried to come off as woke. And I mean woke in a good sense because there's nothing wrong with being woke, and yet this woman couldn't recognize that offering someone tickets to a stage play that tries to make the rape culture of the plantations into just another form of sexual kink, that's someone telling you what they think of you. And if you can't figure out that that's wrong and that that has nothing to do with blackness and everything to do with just racial abuse, then you're a lost cause. Well, we're smarter than that over here. We don't let anyone blur the lines between right and wrong. Sure, we may not have a white-funded platform, but at least we have the truth. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Miss Debbie, Yasharon Heron, Jeffrey Gray, Pamela Hyman, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.